This is a beautiful place, very peaceful. I love the sound of the birds. What do you think of this place?
It's lovely. The tea is especially good. So, what have you been up to lately?
Not much, just trying to stay busy with work.
Oh, this one looks perfect. I wonder if it's ripe enough to eat right now.
It's a busy day today, lots of traffic.
The morning began quietly, with a softness in the air that only rain can bring. Diep stirred from her sleep to the sound of droplets falling against the old roof, the kind of steady rhythm that both comforts and unsettles. She rose slowly, realizing that James had already woken before her. When she walked into the small kitchen, she found him standing by the stove, cooking a simple pot of noodles. His movements were unhurried, almost tender, as if he wanted to preserve the stillness of the morning before the responsibilities of the day arrived. "I didn't know what else to make," James admitted, giving her a small smile as he stirred the broth. "So, I just grabbed a pack of noodles." On the table beside him lay a jar of pickled bamboo shoots, sour and fragrant, the kind that Diep had prepared weeks earlier. He opened it and let her taste. The sourness mixed with the heat of the noodles, a humble but heartfelt meal, and for a moment, both of them forgot the hardships that weighed on their shoulders. Baby Nee was still sleeping in the other room, her small breaths rising and falling in rhythm with the rain. James told Diep to let the child rest. "It's raining anyway," he said. "There's no need to wake her." Diep sat across from him, watching as he ate, and she couldn't help but smile at the way he praised her cooking. "This dish of yours," he said seriously, "should be placed in a 5-star restaurant. It's so delicious." She laughed, shaking her head, but she could see in his eyes that he meant it. Then the conversation shifted, as it often did, to the new house they were building. Only 40% of it was finished, but already James could see the dream taking shape. "Luckily, we decided to build a new house," he said, glancing out the window at the rain pouring down. "Otherwise, all this water would have flooded into the kitchen again." Diep nodded. She had lived in this old place long enough to know the truth of his words. Their breakfast became a quiet exchange of memories and longing. James spoke about the years he had spent abroad, how difficult it had been to be away from her. He tried to explain the feeling of missing her, measuring it with his hands as if distance could be captured in gestures. Diep teased him, claiming she had missed him even more. Beneath their playful words was a truth that neither could deny. The separation had been hard, but it had also taught them the depth of their love. "Now I understand," James said softly, "what it means to truly love someone. It's not about always being together. It's about holding on sincerely, no matter where we are." Diep lowered her gaze, overwhelmed by his honesty. She wanted to thank him not only for waiting for her, but for believing in her, in them. Love, she realized, was less about the grand promises and more about mornings like this. Shared noodles, laughter over bamboo shoots, and the gentle certainty of his presence. Soon, however, Duty called. James announced that he would have to go into the city for work. His tone was apologetic, but Diep only smiled and told him to take care. "It's raining now. Maybe it will clear later," she said. "If it does, I'll go to work too. I can't stay home forever." He agreed but reminded her not to overexert herself. Before leaving, James leaned down to check on Ly, still fast asleep, her face pressed into the pillow. He whispered something to the little girl, a promise perhaps, then turned back to Diep. "Take care of her until I get back," he said. She nodded, and with that he was gone, stepping out into the rain that had begun to lighten. The house felt emptier without him, but also more precious, as if his absence underscored how much his presence meant. When Ly finally awoke, Diep greeted her with warmth and a bowl of noodles. The child's small hands reached eagerly for the food, and soon after, Diep told her about the plan for the day. They would go to the guava garden to harvest fruit. "We'll pick them directly from the trees," she explained, "and it will be cheaper. Then we'll sell them at the market and earn a little profit." Ny's eyes lit up with excitement, and she agreed eagerly. They set out together, the rain having passed, leaving behind a fresh earthiness in the air. The guava orchard stretched wide, branches heavy with fruit. Diep worked steadily, her hands quick and practiced, while Ly trailed behind her, occasionally picking the smaller fruits within her reach. The child's laughter rang through the orchard, mingling with the rustle of leaves. And Diep couldn't help but feel a quiet joy. For all the hardships, these moments, teaching Ly, working side by side, were gifts she cherished. By noon, they had gathered baskets full of guavas. The sun was high now, burning through the morning's rain clouds, and both of them were flushed from the heat. Diep paused to wipe the sweat from her forehead and offered Ly some water. They rested under the shade of a tree for a while, and Diep felt the fatigue in her limbs, but also a deep satisfaction. When they finally carried the guavas to market, the weight of the basket seemed lighter somehow, buoyed by the hope of what they might earn. At the market, voices called out from every direction, vendors hawking their goods, customers bargaining, children weaving through the crowd. Diep laid out her guavas carefully, arranging them so that their freshness would catch the eye. "Come try, it's sweet and crisp," she urged the passers-by. Ly sat beside her, offering fruit with shy smiles, and it wasn't long before people began to stop, charmed not only by the guavas, but by the little girl's earnestness. Sales were brisk. A man bought a full kilo, praising the sweetness of the fruit. A woman stopped to pat Ny's head and purchased more than she had intended, touched by the child's innocence. Diep's hands moved quickly, weighing, bagging, exchanging money, and thanking each customer with genuine gratitude. For every coin she earned, she thought of the food it could buy, the repairs it could pay for, the small security it offered. By mid-afternoon, the baskets were nearly empty. "We've sold almost everything," Diep told Ly, her voice tinged with pride. The little girl clapped her hands in delight, and Diep kissed her forehead. Hardship had marked their lives, but there was also resilience, and in that resilience, joy. On their way home, fate brought them face to face with James again. He had finished his business in the city earlier than expected and had decided to pass by the market. When he spotted Diep and Ly, their baskets nearly empty, he pulled over and greeted them warmly. "You've worked hard today," he said, helping them with the last of the fruit. He bought them sweet cakes from a nearby stall, delighting Ly, who bit into hers with wide-eyed happiness. James then insisted on driving them home. Diep hesitated for a moment, unused to such gestures, but she saw the sincerity in his eyes and agreed. Ly nestled into the back seat, her small arms wrapped around the bag of cakes as if they were treasure. As the car rolled through the village streets, Diep allowed herself to lean back, feeling, for the first time in a long while, that perhaps they were moving toward a safer, steadier future. James suggested stopping at another market on the way back to pick up food for dinner. He let Ly choose vegetables and even bought a pair of of small shoes for her, gently sliding them onto her feet to check the fit. "Perfect," he declared, and Ly beamed up at him with unrestrained affection. Watching them, Diep felt a warmth spread through her chest, a fragile but undeniable sense of family forming before her eyes. Later that evening, as they carried the groceries into the house, James promised Ly that he would read her a story before bed. The girl's face lit up at the promise, and Diep, standing quietly to the side, realized how rare and precious these simple moments were. Life was still uncertain, storms still lingered at the edges, but within this small home, there was peace, and within their hearts, there was hope. The morning after their day at the guava orchard began with a hush that seemed almost sacred. Sunlight filtered through the thin curtains, painting soft patterns across the small living room floor. Ly was the first to wake, rubbing her eyes and stumbling toward Diep's room. "Auntie Diep," she whispered, tugging gently at the blanket. "Wake up. James said he would tell me a story this morning." Diep stirred, smiling at the child's impatience. When they stepped out, they found James already waiting in the courtyard, a book in his hands. He had risen early, prepared tea, and was flipping through the pages as if rehearsing. The moment he saw Ly, his face lit up. He knelt, pulling her into his lap, and began reading. His voice carried a warmth that wrapped around the little girl like a protective embrace. And as Diep watched, she realized that this bond between them was no longer fragile. It was solidifying into something permanent. After breakfast, James mentioned he needed to check on the progress of their new house. "It's coming along faster than I thought," he said, "and I want both of you to see it today." Diep hesitated. She was used to keeping her expectations modest, fearing disappointment if dreams were spoken too loudly. But James's confidence was unwavering, and Ly clapped her hands in excitement, eager for an outing. They set off together, James driving carefully through the familiar winding roads until the partially built house appeared on the horizon. From a distance, it was still a skeleton of bricks and beams, but up close, Diep could already see the outlines of rooms, windows, and a future that felt tantalizingly real. James walked them through each section, the living room, the kitchen, the bedrooms, describing how it would look when finished. Diep touched the walls with trembling fingers, imagining laughter echoing through them, imagining safety she had long believed impossible. They spent the afternoon there, helping in small ways. James lifted bricks while workers mixed cement, and Diep gathered fallen branches to clear the path. Ly darted about, pretending to be an inspector, declaring which corners would be her favorite hiding spots. When they finally sat down to rest beneath a tree, James brought out water and bread, and the three of them shared a makeshift picnic. "This is only the beginning," James said, gazing at the unfinished structure with quiet determination. "When it's done, it won't just be a house. It will be a home for us." Diep looked at him, the weight of his words settling deep within her. She wanted to believe with all her heart, but doubt still lingered like a shadow. Could happiness really last this time? She didn't voice her fears, though. Instead, she leaned against him, letting his certainty steady her. The next day brought unexpected challenges. Rain clouds gathered once more, and by noon, a storm had rolled in, lashing against the fragile construction site. James rushed out to check on the workers, leaving Diep and Ly waiting at home. Hours dragged by with no word, and Diep's anxiety grew heavier. She tried to distract Ly with songs and stories, but her mind wandered constantly to James. Whether he was safe, whether the storm had damaged the work, whether all their hopes had just been swept away. Finally, near evening, the door opened, and James walked in, drenched but smiling. "The damage is minimal," he assured her. "A few walls need reinforcement, but nothing we can't fix." Relief washed over Diep so strongly she nearly cried. She took his wet coat, hung it by the fire, and silently served him hot tea, her hands trembling as she poured. James touched her wrist gently. "I'm here," he whispered, "and I'll always come back." The storm outside raged on, but within the walls of their small home, peace slowly returned. A few days later, Diep decided to take Ly to the orchard again. This time, James insisted on coming along, despite his busy schedule. Together, the three of them picked guavas, laughing when Ly tried to climb too high into the branches. James carried the heavier baskets, refusing to let Diep strain herself, while she teased him for looking more like a farmer than a CEO. At the market, James stood beside her stall, helping to weigh fruit and interact with customers. His presence drew attention, and soon more people gathered, curious about the handsome stranger assisting Diep. She flushed with embarrassment, but James remained unbothered, focused entirely on supporting her. By the end of the day, every guava had been sold, and Diep's pouch of earnings was heavier than usual. Walking home, she realized this was what true partnership felt like: sharing burdens, celebrating small victories, and facing challenges together. That evening, after dinner, James brought up Ly's future. He asked gently if she had ever thought about school. Diep admitted she had dreamed of it, but never dared hope, given their financial struggles. James leaned forward, determination flashing in his eyes. "Every child deserves an education," he said. "I'll make sure she has one." Ly, sitting quietly nearby, perked up at the mention of school. "Will I really get to study like the other kids?" she asked, her voice filled with cautious hope. James smiled, pulling her onto his lap. "Yes, little one. Very soon, you'll have books and pencils, and you'll learn everything you want to know." Diep's eyes grew wet, her heart swelling with gratitude. She knew then that James was not only thinking of her, but of the child who had become like a daughter. It was not just love he was offering, it was family. As days turned into weeks, their routines began to take shape. James split his time between managing his business projects in the city and being present in the village with Diep and Ly. Every evening he was home, he insisted on cooking dinner, surprising them with dishes he had learned abroad. Sometimes they were successful, other times laughably disastrous, but always filled with laughter. Diep, in turn, showed him the simplicity of rural meals, teaching him how to prepare rice properly, how to season soups the traditional way. These exchanges were more than lessons. They were threads weaving their lives together. Ly thrived in the warmth of this new rhythm, her laughter ringing louder each day, her trust in both James and Diep deepening. Still, shadows from the past lingered. Rumors occasionally reached Diep that her old tormentors, the relatives who had once threatened her, were still scheming. James grew more vigilant, ensuring that their new house would have stronger locks, and speaking discreetly with officials he trusted. He reassured Diep constantly that she was safe, that no one would harm her again. She wanted to believe him, and his presence gave her courage, but fear sometimes returned in the quiet hours of the night. On those nights, James would find her sitting awake, staring at the window. He would wrap his arms around her, holding her until the trembling subsided. "Whatever comes," he would whisper, "we'll face it together." Slowly, her fears began to loosen their grip. One afternoon, they returned to the nearly finished house to see the roof being placed. It was a milestone that made Diep's breath catch in her throat. She could already imagine where furniture would go, where Ly would play, where evenings would be spent in peace. James asked her opinion on colors, on window frames, on small details she had never dreamed she would have a say in. She answered shyly at first, but soon her voice grew more confident, adding suggestions and ideas. James listened attentively, as if each word she spoke was invaluable. By the time they left, Diep felt a sense of ownership she had never known before. This wasn't just James's gift to her, it was their creation, their shared dream becoming reality. Another evening found them at the marketplace again, not to sell this time, but simply to walk together. James bought roasted corn for Ly, then led them to a small stall where colorful notebooks were displayed. Choose one, he told the girl, for when you start school. Nye's eyes sparkled as she carefully selected a bright red notebook. She hugged it tightly to her chest, as if it were the most precious treasure in the world. Watching her, Diep felt tears prick her eyes. Such small things, food, notebooks, promises, carried immense meaning when you had lived without them for so long. She glanced at James, and he reached for her hand, squeezing it gently. No words were needed in that moment. Their hearts spoke in unison. As the weeks unfolded, James began involving Diep more in his business conversations. He explained his plans for developing land, building homes, and creating opportunities that could benefit the entire community. At first, she felt overwhelmed by the scale of his vision, but he encouraged her, reminding her that her insights mattered. "You know this place better than I do," he said. "Your perspective will help me make better decisions." Slowly, Diep began to contribute ideas, and to her surprise, James implemented many of them. Their partnership was no longer confined to love and family. It extended into dreams of building something larger, something lasting. This new role gave Diep confidence, and she began to carry herself with a quiet strength that others noticed. Yet, amidst all the progress, James never forgot to nurture the small joys. He kept his promise to read stories to Nye each night. Sometimes he would make up tales of faraway kingdoms and brave little girls who conquered storms, weaving in subtle lessons about courage and kindness. Nye listened with rapt attention, her imagination soaring, while Diep watched from the doorway, her heart swelling with love. On one particularly quiet night, after Nye had fallen asleep, James turned to Diep and whispered, "One day, I want us to give her everything she's ever dreamed of. Not just shelter, not just food, but a future where she can choose her own path." Diep touched his face gently, whispering back, "You already have, James. You've given her hope." As the second phase of their journey drew to a close, the three of them stood together outside the nearly completed house. The sun was setting, casting a golden glow over the fresh paint and sturdy walls. Nye ran circles around them, her laughter echoing in the still air. Diep leaned against James, her hand in his, and for the first time in a long while, she allowed herself to feel unguarded happiness. The past still lingered in fragments. The future still carried uncertainty. But here and now, there was peace. And in that peace, a promise. No matter what storms might come, they would stand together, stronger than before. The final act of their story began on an evening that seemed deceptively calm. The house was nearly finished, painted in soft hues of cream and green, its windows reflecting the last rays of sunlight. Diep, standing in the courtyard, breathed in the scent of fresh timber and damp earth. For the first time, she felt she was standing on the threshold of a life she had never dared to imagine. Yet as night descended, shadows of the past crept back. James had gone to the city for a meeting, leaving her and Nye at home. At first, the quiet was comforting, but soon whispers of unease rose in her heart. She had heard that her estranged relatives, the ones who had once threatened her, were plotting again. And tonight, as she bolted the door, she couldn't shake the feeling that something was about to break. Hours later, James returned, his face grave. "We need to talk," he said softly, after tucking Nye into bed. He explained that he had received unsettling news. The very relatives who had tormented Diep were trying to stir trouble, spreading rumors about her, even questioning James's motives for being with her. Diep's chest tightened with old fear. She had thought those days were behind her, buried under the promise of a new life. James took her hands firmly, his voice steady. "Listen to me. No one will take away what we've built. Not lies, not schemes, not fear. But we must be ready to face them." Diep looked into his eyes and saw not just determination, but a fierce protectiveness that both comforted and terrified her. What if he was dragged into the ugliness of her past? She didn't want to be the reason for his pain. The following days tested their resolve. Workers whispered about men loitering near the construction site. James doubled security, hiring guards to watch over the property. At night, Diep lay awake, listening to the faint sounds outside, clutching Ly close. Yet amid the fear, life pressed forward. Ny's school enrollment papers arrived, and James took her shopping for uniforms and supplies. The little girl's excitement was a beacon of light, cutting through the heaviness. She twirled in her new dress, hugging her notebooks as if they were treasures. Diep, watching her, realized that whatever storm approached, she could not let it steal Ny's joy. This child had already lost too much. That night, she whispered a silent prayer. For strength, for safety, for the courage to fight for the fragile happiness they had found. The confrontation came sooner than expected. One evening, as James returned from overseeing deliveries to the house, he found the gate blocked by two men, Diep's cousins, faces twisted with resentment. "You think you can erase us?" one spat. "She owes us, and by being with her, so do you." James remained calm, but his voice carried an edge of steel. "Diep owes you nothing. Whatever debts you claim are fabrications. Leave her alone." The men sneered, muttering threats, but James stood his ground until they slunk away into the night. When he told Diep what happened, she trembled, but he pulled her close. "They thrive on fear. Don't give it to them. Together, we're stronger than their hatred." Still, the encounter shook her deeply, dredging up old scars that words alone couldn't heal. It was Ly who unknowingly saved them from despair. One morning, as tension lingered like a fog, she burst into the kitchen, waving a drawing she had made. It was a picture of three stick figures, James, Diep, and herself, standing in front of their new house, surrounded by flowers. Above them, in uneven letters, she had written, "Our family forever." Diep clutched the paper, tears spilling down her cheeks. In that moment, she understood that their fight was not just for survival. It was for the child who had given them a reason to hope. James framed the drawing and placed it by the doorway of their unfinished home. "This is our shield," he told Diep. "Whenever doubt creeps in, look at it and remember why we're here." As weeks turned into months, the house reached completion. The day they moved in, the sun blazed high, scattering light across freshly painted walls and polished floors. Neighbors came to help, carrying baskets, bedding, and laughter into the new space. Ly ran from room to room, claiming each corner as if it were a kingdom. Diep stood silently in the doorway, overwhelmed. She remembered nights of hunger, days of humiliation, and the crushing weight of hopelessness. And now here she was, stepping into a home built not of wealth alone, but of love, resilience, and shared dreams. James wrapped an arm around her, whispering, "Welcome home." For the first time in years, she allowed herself to believe the words, but peace was fragile. On the very night of their housewarming, Diep's former relatives made one final attempt to shatter it. They appeared uninvited, voices raised, demanding money, hurling insults meant to wound. The guests froze, tension crackling in the air. James stepped forward, shielding Diep and Ly. His voice was calm but unyielding. "This ends now. Your cruelty has no place here. If you want to test me, know that I will use every resource I have to protect my family." The men blustered, but faced with his unwavering stance and the quiet support of the gathered neighbors, they faltered. One by one, they slunk away, their threats dissolving into the night. Silence fell, broken only by the crackle of lantern light. James turned to Diep, his face softening. "No more shadows," he said. "From this day forward, only light." Life slowly settled into rhythm. Ly started school, her laughter filling the mornings as she recited lessons at the kitchen table. Diep managed the household, learning to balance daily tasks with small contributions to James's business ventures. James, though busier than ever, made time every evening to return to them, to share meals, stories, and dreams. There were still challenges, storms that damaged crops, setbacks in projects. But none could shake the foundation they had built together. Each difficulty only reinforced their bond, teaching them that love was not about avoiding hardship, but about facing it side by side. One evening, months after the move, James surprised Diep with a small gathering in the courtyard. Lanterns hung from trees, casting golden light, and neighbors filled the space with warmth and laughter. At the center, James took Diep's hand, his voice carrying above the crowd. "You once feared that happiness was fleeting," he said, eyes locked on hers. "But tonight, in front of everyone who matters, I promise you, it is not. Our love is strong enough to outlast storms, lies, and shadows. You are my partner, my strength, my home." He knelt, presenting a simple ring that glimmered in the lantern light. Diep's breath caught, tears spilling freely. With trembling hands, she accepted, and the courtyard erupted in applause. Ly leapt into their arms, laughing, and for the first time, Diep felt not just safe, but cherished. As time moved forward, their story became a quiet legend in the village, a tale of resilience, of a woman who rose from despair, of a man who chose love over convenience, of a child who stitched broken hearts together. Diep often found herself gazing at the framed drawing still hanging by their doorway. "Our family forever." The words, once a child's scribble, had become a prophecy fulfilled. And in the soft light of each dawn, as James kissed her forehead and Ly's laughter echoed through the halls, Diep knew that they had finally conquered the storm. Their future was not without challenges, but it was theirs, built on love, courage, and the unshakable promise that together, they would always find peace after the storm.